This happened last summer when I went to Joyland with my cousin. It was a Friday night and the place was packed. Families filled the walkways, kids ran between rides, and music blasted from speakers mounted around the park. My cousin and I had been coming there since we were kids. We knew the layout well enough that we usually split up and met later whenever one of us wanted to try different rides. Around 11 p.m., he stepped away to take a phone call from his girlfriend. I sat alone on a bench near one of the older sections of the park. That's when I noticed something strange. A ride was operating in a corner of the park where there shouldn't have been one. At first, I assumed I was mistaken. I stood up and looked again. The ride was definitely there. It was an old swing ride with faded lights circling the top. The thing that immediately bothered me was that I recognized it. The haunted swing. I remembered that ride from childhood. It had been closed for years. In fact, I distinctly remembered hearing that it had been removed. Yet there it was. The lights glowed softly in the darkness. The swings rotated slowly, and several people were riding it. For some reason, I couldn't stop staring. Something felt wrong. Not scary, just wrong. The riders weren't reacting at all. No laughter. No conversation. No movement. They simply sat there facing forward. I started walking toward it. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. The sounds from the rest of Joyland seemed to fade behind me. Even the music became distant. When I reached the ride, I noticed there wasn't a single employee nearby. No operator, no maintenance worker. Nobody. The ride continued turning. 7 people sat in the swings. Every single one of them appeared completely expressionless. I watched for almost a minute. None of them blinked. None of them spoke. The ride completed another rotation. As one of the swings passed close to me, I got a better look at the woman sitting in it. My stomach tightened. Her skin looked unnaturally pale. Her eyes were open wider than normal. She looked less like a living person and more like a mannequin. My phone buzzed. My cousin. He asked where I was. I told him about the ride. There was silence. Then he laughed. What ride? The old haunted swing. Another pause. Dude, that thing isn't here anymore. I looked back at it. The ride continued spinning. I can literally see it. Stay where you are. I'm coming. While waiting, I pulled out my phone. I wanted proof. I opened the camera and aimed it toward the ride. The screen showed nothing, just an empty concrete area. I lowered the phone. The ride was there. I raised it again. Nothing. I tried recording video. The same thing happened. The ride simply didn't appear on camera. My heart started racing. 5 minutes later, my cousin arrived. I pointed immediately. There. He stared at the empty space. What are you talking about? I turned. The ride was gone. The entire area was empty. No lights. No swings. Nothing. Just cracked pavement and weeds. I didn't tell him about the riders. At that point, I wasn't even sure I'd seen them. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The next day, I searched online. After digging through old articles, I found information about the ride. 21 years earlier, there had been an accident. A mechanical failure caused several riders to be injured. One woman later died from her injuries. The article included a photograph. The second I saw it, my blood ran cold. The woman in the picture was the same person I'd seen on the ride. Same face. Same eyes. Same expression. I shut my laptop immediately. For a while, I convinced myself it was coincidence. Then strange things started happening. 3 nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. Someone was standing outside my bedroom window. At least, that's what I thought. I sat upright in bed. The figure disappeared before I could focus on it. I checked outside. Nobody was there. The next night, it happened again. This time, I saw a woman standing across the street, perfectly still, watching my house. The moment headlights passed between us, she vanished. I told nobody. Even saying it out loud sounded ridiculous. A week later, I returned to Joyland. I don't know why. Part curiosity, part stupidity. I wanted to prove to myself that I'd imagined everything. The park was quieter that night. Around closing time, I wandered back toward the old section. The area was empty. Then I heard music, soft carnival music. Coming from somewhere ahead, I followed the sound. As I rounded a maintenance building, I froze. The ride was back. Exactly where I'd seen it before. The lights glowed against the darkness. The swings rotated slowly, and there were 7 riders. The same 7. This time, I didn't get closer. I immediately turned around. That's when I heard someone behind me. A voice. Female. Soft. 8. I stopped. The voice came again. 8. I looked back. The ride continued spinning. The woman I'd recognized was now looking directly at me. For the first time, every other rider still stared forward. Only she was looking at me. Then I noticed something. There weren't 7 riders anymore. There were 8. One of the swings was occupied by someone wearing clothes identical to mine. The figure's head hung forward. Its face remained hidden. I ran. I don't remember much after that. I pushed through crowds and left the park as fast as possible. I never returned. A few months later, my cousin sent me a message. Someone had uploaded old photographs of Joyland to a local community page. Most were ordinary. Families. Rides. Food stands. Nothing unusual. Then he sent one picture. It had been taken near the old section of the park about 10 years earlier. The photo showed a group of visitors walking past an empty concrete area. At least it looked empty at first. Then I zoomed in. Barely visible in the background was the outline of the haunted swing. The photographer apparently hadn't noticed it, but something else stood out. One of the riders wasn't facing forward. One rider was looking directly toward the camera. Even blurry, I recognized the face. The woman from the newspaper article. My cousin thought it was just a weird coincidence. I never told him the worst part. The 8th rider was visible too, and even though the image was taken years before I ever saw the ride, the person sitting there looked exactly like me. A friend of mine worked security at Joyland for about 6 months. This happened during his first month on the job. The reason I believe his story is because he's not the type of person who makes things up. He's one of those guys who always has a logical explanation for everything. Ghosts, haunted places, paranormal videos online. He thought all of it was nonsense. After hearing what happened to him, I'm not sure he feels the same way anymore. He worked the closing shift. Most nights, he wouldn't leave until around 2 a.m. Once the park closed, security guards would split up and check different sections before heading home. The rides would be shut down. The music would stop. The crowds would disappear. According to him, Joyland felt like a completely different place after midnight. Without thousands of people around, the park became strangely quiet. You could hear things you normally wouldn't notice. The hum of electrical equipment. Wind moving through trees. Metal creaking from cooling ride structures. Little noises that suddenly seemed much louder when nobody else was around. One Thursday night, his supervisor assigned him to inspect an older maintenance area near the back of the property. The area wasn't accessible to visitors. Most employees rarely went there unless they had a specific reason. Several old storage buildings sat behind a row of sheds near the edge of the park. One of those buildings had been scheduled for demolition later that year. According to management, the structure was outdated and no longer used. My friend drove a small security cart toward the area. When he arrived, he immediately noticed something strange. One of the side doors stood open. At first, he wasn't concerned. Maintenance crews occasionally forgot to lock things. Still, protocol required him to check. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped inside. The hallway beyond the door was dark. Concrete walls stretched ahead. Dust covered everything. The place felt abandoned. He walked slowly, checking rooms as he went. Most were empty. Old tools. Broken equipment. Stacks of unused parts. Nothing unusual. Then he heard a sound. A door closing somewhere deeper inside the building. The noise echoed through the hallway. He stopped walking. Someone else was definitely inside. His first assumption was that another employee had entered without signing out. That happened occasionally. He called out. Security. No answer. He continued forward. A few moments later, he heard footsteps. Slow. Steady. Moving away from him. Almost like whoever was inside didn't want to be found. He followed the sound. The footsteps led him farther into the building. Every time he thought he was getting closer, the sound moved farther away. Eventually, he reached a section of hallway that seemed older than the rest. The concrete looked different. The ceiling pipes appeared rusted. The air felt colder. At the end stood a partially open metal door. The footsteps stopped beyond it. My friend pushed the door open. The room inside was empty. Completely empty. No people. No furniture. Nothing. Just bare concrete walls. He searched every corner. Nobody. That's when he noticed something odd. A single chair sat against one wall. The chair looked relatively new. Everything else in the building was covered in dust. The chair wasn't. It looked recently used. As he approached it, his radio crackled. "Where are you?" It was another guard named Imran, my friend explained. There was silence. Then Imran asked a question. "What room are you in?" my friend described it. Another long pause followed. Then came the response. "Get out." "What?" "Leave the building right now." My friend laughed. Imran didn't. His voice sounded genuinely nervous. "Seriously, get out." Before my friend could respond, a loud bang erupted somewhere behind him. He spun around. The metal door had slammed shut. Hard. The noise echoed through the room. For several seconds, everything became silent. Then he heard breathing. Not from the radio. Not from outside. Inside the room. Someone was breathing. Slowly. Deeply. Standing somewhere nearby. My friend immediately swept his flashlight around the room. Nobody. The breathing continued. He could hear it clearly. The sound seemed to move around him. One moment it came from his left, then behind him, then directly beside him. He ran for the door. The moment he opened it, the breathing stopped. He hurried into the hallway. Then he heard footsteps. Fast. Extremely fast, charging toward him from deeper within the building. The sound was impossible to mistake. Someone was running. My friend pointed his flashlight toward the darkness. Nothing. Yet the footsteps kept coming. Closer. 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 He turned and sprinted. The sounds followed him all the way to the exit. Only when he reached the parking area did they stop. Several minutes later, Imran arrived. The first thing he asked was whether my friend had entered a room containing a chair. When my friend said yes, Imran looked disturbed. Apparently, other employees had described the same thing. The chair. Always the chair. Nobody knew why. Over the next few weeks, my friend tried to forget about it. Then strange things started happening. Whenever he worked near that section of the park, he would hear footsteps. Not often. Just occasionally, always behind him. Whenever he turned around, nobody would be there. One night, he heard somebody whisper his name. Another night, he saw movement inside the maintenance building despite the structure being locked. The incidents were strange, but not enough to convince him something paranormal was happening. Then came the security footage. Around 1 a.m., my friend was monitoring cameras inside the security office. One screen showed the path behind the maintenance area. A man stood there, motionless, watching the camera. The image quality wasn't great, but something about the figure looked wrong. His posture, his expression, the way he stood completely still. My friend zoomed in. The moment he did, the man smiled. Not a normal smile, an unnaturally wide grin. The kind that instantly makes your stomach drop. Then the camera feed cut out. When it returned, the figure was gone. Security searched the area immediately. Nobody was found. The next day, my friend reviewed the footage again. The man wasn't there. The recording showed an empty walkway. Exactly like the figure had never existed. A few days later, curiosity got the better of him. He began asking older employees about the building. Most didn't want to discuss it. Eventually, one maintenance worker agreed to talk. According to him, there had been a serious accident years earlier. A mechanic had died during repairs. But that wasn't the strange part. The worker lowered his voice before telling the rest. Apparently, several employees reported seeing the mechanic after his death. Not once, not twice. For years afterward, usually near the old maintenance building. The descriptions were always similar. Someone standing in the distance, watching, smiling. My friend still wasn't convinced. Until one evening, the worker showed him an old photograph. The picture had been taken decades earlier. Several employees stood outside the maintenance building. The mechanic was among them. The second my friend saw the image, his blood ran cold. It was the man from the camera. The same face. The same smile. The same eyes. Months passed. Nothing major happened. The building remained closed. Then demolition day finally arrived. Construction crews arrived early one morning. Security was assigned to monitor the area. My friend happened to be working. Around noon, workers began removing interior walls. Everything proceeded normally until one crew reached the end of the old hallway, the section where my friend had discovered the room. A supervisor suddenly ordered everyone to stop. Something had been found. Several employees gathered around. My friend walked over. Behind a sealed wall sat a small room, a room that supposedly didn't exist. Inside was a single metal chair, nothing else. Just the chair, the exact chair my friend had seen months earlier. The room had been completely enclosed. There was no visible entrance. No way for anyone to enter or leave. Yet the chair wasn't dusty. It looked recently used. The workers joked about it at first. That changed when one of them noticed something scratched into the concrete floor beneath the chair. A name. The mechanic's name. The same man who had died years earlier. The same man from the photograph. The same man from the camera footage. The demolition project was delayed for several days after that. Officially, nobody ever explained why. My friend quit not long afterward. Before leaving, he asked Imran one final question. Why had he told him to get out of the building that first night? Imran was quiet for a moment. Then he answered, because years earlier, he had entered that same room himself. And when he sat in the chair, he heard someone whisper directly into his ear. The voice said only 4 words. Someone else can sit. Neither of them ever went back. This happened when I was 17. A group of friends and I decided to spend a Saturday evening at Joyland during summer break. It wasn't a special occasion. We were just bored and looking for something to do. We arrived around 7 p.m. The park was packed. Families filled every walkway. Kids ran from ride to ride carrying balloons and snacks. Music echoed from every corner. The atmosphere felt normal. Looking back, that's probably why what happened later affected me so much. Nothing about that night felt unusual at first. Around midnight, we started making our way toward the exit. That's when my friend Adnan suddenly realized he'd lost his wallet. At first, we thought it would be easy to find. We retraced our steps, checked benches, food courts, ride entrances. Nothing. Eventually, we split up to search different areas. I headed toward an older section of the park, while everyone else checked the main attractions. By then, most visitors had already left. The park felt completely different. Without the crowds, the rides looked strangely lifeless. The bright lights seemed weaker. The music sounded distant. I spent about 20 minutes searching. No wallet. I was about to head back when I noticed someone standing near a carousel. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. She wore a white dress and held a stuffed rabbit against her chest. At first, I assumed she had gotten separated from her parents. That wasn't unusual in a crowded place. I walked over. Are you okay? She didn't answer. She simply stared at me. I asked if she was lost. Nothing. Then she slowly raised her arm and pointed toward the carousel. I looked. Nobody was there. When I turned back, she was still staring. Her expression bothered me. Not because she looked scared, because she didn't look scared at all. She looked empty, like she wasn't feeling anything. I asked where her parents were. Again, she pointed. This time toward a narrow path behind the carousel. I figured she wanted me to follow her. So I did. The path led into a quieter section of the park. The farther we walked, the fewer lights there were. The sounds of the remaining visitors faded behind us. The little girl never spoke. She just kept walking. Eventually, she stopped beside an old fence. Then she pointed beyond it. I looked through the metal bars. There was nothing there. Just darkness. I turned around to ask what she wanted me to see. The girl was gone. Completely gone. I spun around. The path behind me was empty. There was nowhere she could have disappeared. No buildings. No hiding spots. Nothing. I searched the area for several minutes. No sign of her. That's when a voice startled me. "Sir?" I nearly jumped. A security guard stood nearby. He asked what I was doing. I explained about the little girl. The moment I described her, his expression changed. "White dress?" I nodded. "Stuffed rabbit?" I nodded again. The guard stared at me for a moment. Then he asked me to follow him. He didn't explain why. He simply led me toward the security office near the front of the park. Once inside, he closed the door. The office contained several monitors showing camera feeds from around Joyland. A few employees sat inside. The guard approached an older supervisor and quietly repeated what I had told him. The supervisor looked at me. Then he asked me to describe the girl again. When I finished, neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally, the supervisor opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were newspaper clippings. Most appeared old. Very old. He flipped through several pages before stopping. Then he slid one article across the desk. A photograph accompanied the story. The second I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was the girl. Same dress, same face, same rabbit. The article described a child who had disappeared from the park years earlier. Despite extensive searches, she was never found. No body. No suspect. Nothing. The case remained unsolved. I honestly thought they were messing with me. Maybe it was some kind of local legend employees liked telling. Then the supervisor said something strange. "You aren't the first person." "What do you mean?" He opened the folder further. Inside were handwritten reports. Dozens of them. Visitors. Employees. Security guards. All claiming they had seen the same girl. Most reports came from the older sections of the park. Some dated back years. I didn't know what to think. Eventually, I met my friends outside and we left. They laughed when I told them what happened. Honestly, I probably would have laughed too. For a while, I convinced myself it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe I saw another child. Maybe my imagination filled in details after seeing the newspaper clipping. Then something happened that made that explanation impossible. 3 days later, I received a message from Adnan. He had found his wallet. At first, that sounded like good news. Until he told me where. A maintenance employee discovered it behind a locked fence in a restricted area. The same fence where I'd lost sight of the girl. The problem was that nobody had entered that area during the search. Not me, not Adnan, not security. The wallet shouldn't have been there. We joked about it and moved on. But a month later, curiosity got the better of me. I returned to Joyland alone. I wanted one more look at the area. Part of me hoped I'd find a logical explanation. I arrived around closing time. As the crowds thinned, I walked toward the old carousel, the same one where I'd first seen the girl. Everything looked normal. I almost felt stupid for coming back. Then I noticed something. A stuffed rabbit sat on a nearby bench. Old, dirty, faded with age. It looked exactly like the one the girl had been carrying. I approached slowly. The toy appeared worn almost beyond recognition. One button eye was missing. The fabric had yellowed with age. I picked it up. Attached to one ear was a small piece of cloth. At first, I thought it was random. Then I realized it looked like part of a name tag. There were faded letters on it, barely readable. I could only make out a few characters, enough to match the name mentioned in the newspaper article. My hands started shaking. I immediately brought the rabbit to a nearby security guard. He looked disturbed the moment he saw it. Without saying much, he took me back to the office. The older supervisor was there again. When he saw the rabbit, his face went pale. He asked where I'd found it. I told him. The room became quiet. Finally, he admitted something. Years earlier, when the girl disappeared, the rabbit disappeared too. According to her parents, she never went anywhere without it. The toy had never been recovered. Not during the investigation. Not afterward. Never. Until now. I left shortly after that. The experience bothered me for months. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe someone had found the rabbit years ago and left it there as a prank. That's what I told myself. Then came the final incident. About 6 months later, Adnan and I returned to Joyland with several friends. We spent most of the evening riding attractions and eating junk food. Around midnight, we passed the old carousel. One of our friends suddenly stopped walking. "Who's that?" He pointed toward a path leading into the darker section of the park. At the end of the path stood a little girl, white dress, stuffed rabbit, watching us. Every one of us saw her. Not just me. Not just Adnan. All 6 of us. For several seconds, nobody moved. The girl simply stood there. Then she raised one hand and pointed toward the same fence where Adnan's wallet had been found. The moment we looked away and back again, she was gone. We ran to the spot immediately. There was nobody there. No footprints, no child. Nothing. Just darkness. A few weeks later, Adnan contacted the park to ask about the old missing person case. The employee who responded told him something that still bothers me. Years after the disappearance, construction crews discovered a sealed underground service tunnel beneath that section of the park. The tunnel had existed long before the modern rides were built. Investigators searched it. They found nothing. But according to old records, the tunnel's entrance had originally been located near the exact spot where the girl was last seen, near the fence, near where the wallet appeared, near where every witness reported seeing her. I don't know what happened to that little girl. Maybe nobody ever will. But every few years, new reports still appear from visitors who claim they've seen a child in a white dress carrying a stuffed rabbit, standing alone after midnight, watching people from a distance, and always pointing toward the same place.